Hello, it is 501 week number 2. You've made it through the first week. This is the second week. I'm very good with counting. Should we jump into it? All right, we shall. So this week we're looking at big themes: innovation, change, 21st century learning, education, while keeping in mind that we're a fifth of the way through the 21st century. At some point I'm going to start saying 22nd century education, because we really should be looking ahead, although at this point just planning a week ahead with our lives feels like a win, so we'll take it. We will take it. You are continuing with Sir Ken Robinson's book in Chapter 2. There's a discussion board thread around that, looking at how Robinson shares with us that schools were basically copied from the industrial model, right? Factory workers, compliant workers, repetitive workers. So that's what he shares. Your thought is, do you agree? Yes? No? And how might that impact your view of what school can be? How might that impact your classroom if you're in the classroom? And then please share some examples from, current school life, previous school life, kind of whatever kind of jumps out at you. All right. You have 3 short videos to read. One about Tony Wagner, Prinsky book, and then Sir Ken Robinson's famous TED Talk, Do Skills Kill Creativity? If you have not watched this, pop some popcorn, sit down. It is, I think, like a mile marker for educators. It was like before this talk and kind of after this talk, not necessarily in like how it's changed everything, but just like that was definitely a moment where we were like, all right, we're not just doing No Child Left Behind, teaching to the test, living by the test scores. Those are still important for various reasons, but there's been kind of an infatuation with that. So let's look actually just this whole idea about creativity. I was thinking a lot about this kind of theme this week, and actually riffed a little bit off on my podcast episode. So like, zero pressure. I do not expect you to listen. This might be the first time as an instructor I've even shared that I have a podcast. But it's called Bill Selleck Talks, because my name is Bill Selleck and it is me talking. And just talked about kind of creativity in general in schools, and really kind of talked through, I don't want to spoil the episode, but I can give you the cliff notes. I can give you the Bill notes. Oh, that was good. It's just like, take that in for a moment. That was nice. Like, jokes are just going downhill for the next 6 weeks. I'll apologize in advance. The Bill notes. So my undergrad is actually in music. I focused, you have to have an instrument, that was classical guitar. Everybody learned piano, and then an emphasis with some additional coursework that was on sound design. Ended up working in a recording studio, Orange Whip, in Santa Barbara. If you were ever in the punk rock scene, you know a lot of those bands. You're like, The Whip? Yes, The Whip. Most of you have no idea what I'm talking about, because it wasn't a big deal unless you were in the punk rock scene. Not the point. The point is that actually, it's interesting that I'm director of technology, like overseeing everything electrical that's not actually electricity, right? Like, I'm not an electrician, but short of that, if it uses electricity, that kind of hits my department. Most interestingly, like, I'm surrounded by just hundreds of iPads to my left, to my right, getting them all set up for the first day of school. For me, that's what's interesting, right? Is like, what devices do we use? Why do we use them? How do we use them? And what do we do with them? And what can we do with them that we otherwise might not be able to? And so much of that, I think, is actually informed by, if we take just a step back, like, I've heard people kind of describe kind of the scientific lens, like, as a science teacher, I want my kids to kind of view the world through a scientific lens. And so much of that is just the scientific method, right? Like, that's such a concrete example. And so I'm just I was in the episode and now also trying to think through, like, what, instead of the scientific lens, what's kind of the musician's lens? Like, what does that degree get me? And so much of that is creativity, but I think that's often just, like, dismissed, like, that's not important. In coursework and discussions, of course, you're going to be like, creativity is important, yada, yada. And I agree. Yes, that's exactly how I would answer in the discussion board posts. And, you're like, all right, like 9:30 a.m., if I'm teaching little ones, I don't write creativity on the board. It's like we're doing writing, language arts, math, right? Like those are like the subjects we have to teach. And it feels like creativity is like a nice to have, a like skills that kids can do to be creative. In this podcast episode and this video now, I think that the musician's lens, and really what I took from an undergrad in music, is this balance and kind of this tension, but also this nice pairing, like a Venn diagram, of creating, right, making something original, creativity, but also like being really critical with how you approach something, right? So kind of critical thinking, but also like critical decision making, dare I say rigor. So this interesting kind of marriage of creativity and critical analysis, maybe being analytical, right? So as we're writing a song, as I'm even just playing an instrument, right? As I'm playing guitar, this is me playing guitar, like, yes, it's creative, but also like I'm very specific with where my thumb, the joint on my thumb is located on the neck of the guitar, like with electric guitar, which pedals are set up in which order, and then on the amp, like which settings. It's like a really, really specific thing. If I'm going to record, there's all sorts of, technical know-how, but also kind of an artisticness to it. It's not just, I'm going to make something rock and roll. I'm going to kick over an amp and smash my guitar. And I'm creative. But it's, like this really deep, like, attention to detail that I think is often left out of headlines like, do schools kill creativity? Spoiler, I think the answer is yes. But creativity is like a deeply analytical thing. And I feel like we're kind of missing the mark on that as educators. And if we can like get back on that, like teaching students to like critique, be really analytical and purposeful. Like if you're ever going to record a song, if you've ever done that, my goodness, if you spent less than an hour recording a song, it technically counts as recording a song, but like, yeah, it takes a long time. It takes, if you're doing it right, it takes 5 days just to set up drums and make them sound good. 1 day would be pretty fast, recording just the bass, even if you play it almost perfectly, is a full day. Guitar is almost a full day per song, and then singing just your main lyric is going to be like a full day, like a 12-hour day. Maybe gets you like the first song, just your lead vocal, no backing vocals. And with each one of those, you're looking at every single note with your vocals, every single syllable, every single breath, and you're recording again and again and again. Like it's totally common to get to like take 50 or, sing like 10 in a row and then pick the best syllable out of each one, kind of Frankenstein it. So as you look at kind of that process, it's a deeply like critical process. And I think that that's an important step that we need to do when we talk about creativity. It's not just like, let's play some music. Woo, that was fun. Let's just paint. That was fun, right? But like really being critical of what we're doing, how we're doing it, so that it can be kind of as good as it can be with our skill level. So that's my little soapbox with that. I go in a slightly different direction on the podcast. If you want to hear more, you're welcome to. If not, then don't. Those 3 videos, by the way, are your group assignment. So this group assignment, you're going to create a Venn diagram comparing Wagner, Prensky, and Robinson. Now, most of us are in California. I believe 1 person's in New York, and I know 2 are in Spain. So this does not need to be like, let's all hop on a Zoom call at the same time and build it at the same time. It's probably going to be a couple emails back and forth, maybe using Blackboard and the groups feature to have kind of your own private threaded discussion. All right, I'll build the Venn diagram. Cool, like I'll add it on this day. You definitely don't need to actually work on it at the same time. You just have to work on the same thing, right? There's a template linked using Google Drawings. So when you open that up, it is going to give you a preview of it. Little blue icon that says use the template. You're going to add your name and then just add, text boxes. So again, as long as you're on the same Google Drawing, somebody needs to say, I'll do that. There's really not a lot of collaboration required. There certainly can be, like if you want to hop on a Zoom call and run through it together, awesome. But I know that personally, when I'm taking class in like group projects, thumbs down. Kind of feels like in some ways globally, trying to get ahead of this pandemic feels to me in a lot of ways like a group project. It's like, I did what I need to do. So hopefully you will not feel that way. All right. What else do we have on week 2? You have a couple videos. David Platt, who's involved with SGVQ, San Gabriel Valley Q, shares a little bit about elements of 21st century learning connected with our theme from week 2. And then it says Twitter 101. There are actually 5 videos. That is a playlist for you. That's actually me on the far left. That's really funny that I'm in there of all the things. But if you don't know much about using Twitter as an educator, please, please, please watch those 5 videos. If you're on it all the time and have thousands of followers and following thousands of people, then you can probably skip that. Otherwise, they're kind of older videos. Teachers aren't as much making videos like, here's how to use Twitter in the way that they used to be, maybe 5-10 years ago. But they're fantastic. They're made, I'm one of the people that made the video too. Some people that share with you, a bit of how they use Twitter as an educator. You have a checkpoint. Make sure to follow those directions. And then finally, we have our social media starter kit. On the week 2 page, if you just follow those bullet points, that's really the assignment, right? So create or update a Twitter account for you as an educator, and you're going to just do like the basic things so it looks like you have an account. Profile photo, header photo, pick a theme color, get a username that isn't something inappropriate for an educator. It doesn't have to be super professional. For me, I try and do just Bill Selleck for all my usernames. There's actually another Bill Selleck that teaches. He was teaching 1st grade last time I checked. And on the Twitters, on all the internets, he goes by William Selleck because I have dominated the Google results when you type in Bill Selleck. So there you have it. Strongly encourage you to download Twitter to a mobile device, iPad or your phone, and follow at least 20 people. You can just click on my profile, like find me, follow me, see who I follow, and follow 20 of those people, and you'll be off to the races. So, you're welcome to follow whomever you want based on kind of however you want. Strongly encourage you to make those educators, and that's the assignment, right? Take a look at the rubric, make sure you're doing all of that. Tweet out a couple of times, make sure you don't have typos. It's an interesting time on the Twitters, as my mom calls it, for educators, because it used to be like really casual when I found it, and then became like really professional, and then really like promote-y. Go to my thing, buy my thing, here's my thing. And now is like highly visual, right? So adding lots of GIFs. It's definitely in line with how educators are using Twitter. It's an interesting mix of personal, professional, formal, casual. It's kind of all the things, and I think a big blurring of that was really looking at how we as educators are being anti-racist, right? Like how we're showing up with our full selves to talk about inclusivity, diversity, inclusion, justice. These are things that I think when I started using Twitter, just educators weren't talking about. Possibly some were thinking, most were thinking. I was mostly just thinking about like interesting, innovative ways to use technology in my classroom. But a lot of the conversations are how we show up with all the biases that we show up with, and then what we do about them. And then also just even looking at, platforms and devices and, the bias built into that. And a lot of times the built-in algorithmic racism that's built into, like anything that has an algorithm to it. Quick aside, there's a fantastic book if you're looking for an audio book, Algorithms of Oppression. Dr. Noble out of UCLA wrote that, and it looks pretty heavily at Google search, which I try and now call commercial search, and gives example after example of the depending on what you are searching, right? Like the deep racism within Google's search algorithm. And I think that we tend to have, or I should say I used to think of like devices and applications and websites as kind of neutral, right? You type it in and it gives you results. And I've learned that it's very much not that case. So this is kind of a roundabout, slightly long-winded way of looking at, I think how Twitter has evolved over time for educators, and why it's not as simple as I use it only to share resources, right? Because I think if you're only doing that, then you're missing out on kind of those conversations and just who we are as educators, right? Like it's in some ways pretty hard to separate who we are from our role or our job or our profession. Not to say you need to take pictures of all your food and tweet that out and share pictures of your family, right? Like sometimes I'll share food actually, but like I share very little about my family, mostly because I have young children, and that's a choice my wife and I have made. But trying to keep it more about kind of my interests, my personal learning around a lot of the just trying to grow like as an educator in a way that 5 years ago was like, here's a great resource, here's a blog post, here's a podcast episode. It's more nuanced from that. So take what you will from that. Hopefully it gives you kind of more freedom to share. Like there's not really a wrong way to use Twitter these days as an educator, and just the more you're seeing what people share and how they share it, you'll get a better feel for what that looks like. And if you're looking for just, Bill, tell me, what do I share? Find a blog post, find a podcast episode, link to it, add an image or a GIF, and say like, if it's for first grade teachers, hey, #first chat, great blog post about first day of school. Hey, second grade teachers, I'm teaching second grade this year and found this great blog post about Genius Hour with second graders. Just listen to the latest episode about, developing a musician's lens. Link to my podcast. You don't need to do that. But just like really simple stuff, sharing, resharing what other people have already shared is a great thing to do. So that's what the assignment is. Give you a pretty long answer to that because I've already received, I'm recording this like on a Thursday night. Have already received like a full week ahead of time, half a dozen emails asking for clarification around it. So sounds like a handful of you want a couple more examples of actually what that looks like. But that is all. That is week 2. Continue to reach out with any questions. Hope you're able to stay as safe as you can, and hope that you are enjoying 501 thus far. Happy week 2, everybody.